And welcome to your third Java tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at loops, user input, and arrays. So, let's begin. So, what is a loop? It's basically a block of code that goes over and over and over several times. So, it loops through that block of code. So, the for loop has three parts to it. You have the first part where you initialize a variable and you set it equal to some value. The second part is some condition that has to be met. And the third part is the change in value, so whether you increase it or decrease it. So in this case, we have the value int I is equal to 0, and this loops through as long as I is less than 5. So why is it that we set I is equal to 0? We'll be covering that in a bit when we talk about arrays where their index always starts at 0. So anyway, look at this code right here. We're going to comment it out, or uncomment it, and we're going to print out the word hi inside of the for loop. So let's see what this does. So the first thing it does is Java sees that, okay, I is set to 0. That's perfect. And now we do it as long as I is less than 5. So we print out hi as long as I is less than 5, and I is going to be increased by 1. So, is I less than 5? Yes, it is, because it's 0. So, there, it prints it once. It goes back to the top of the program, and it sees that I gets added once, so the value of I becomes 1. And then, is 1 less than 5? Yes, it is. It does that for 2, 3, 4, and something interesting happens when it's at 5. When it hits 5, it doesn't print it out, but it sees that 5 is not less than 5, so this condition is no longer met. So it doesn't print out hi anymore, so it goes out of the loop and it exits. So how many times should hi get printed out? If you said 5 times, that's absolutely correct. Let's see what it does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It prints it out 5 times. This can get a bit more tricky once we get into the idea of nested loops, but that will be covered later on when we practice some real-life applications. So, the second loop we have is a while loop. So, basically this means that you execute some block of code while a condition is met. So, notice here at the top, we declared, let's just get rid of these two because they're bothering me. If you see at the top of the program, we see that I declared a variable num is equal to 5, which is, of course, an integer. Now, we will execute this as long as n does not equal to 0. So this right here is the syntax for not equals to. So keep that in mind, because that's also a very important syntax to remember. Now, we're going to print out hello as long as 5 does not equal to 0. If we did not have this decrementer, or a variable, something to decrease the number, what would happen? Well, if you said an infinite loop, you're correct. So what is an infinite loop? It's a loop that executes infinitely. So if we highlight this, we see that the condition num does not equal 0 is always true, and we don't have anything to decrease num, so what's stopping this program from executing? Nothing. So this program is just going to execute forever and ever until we hit stop. So let's see this in action. So as you can see, it's going absolutely nuts. It's printing out hello just over and over and over and over again. So let's stop that and kill the program. And that's why this decrementer in here is so important. So like before, it's going to print it out 5 times because we decrease it by once. And as soon as it hits 0, it sees that num is equal to 0, so it skips everything here and just exits out. So those are the two loops that are very, very well known. And it's really good to know these two because they're very important and they come up in many, many, many programs. Now, let's move on to arrays. So what is an array? In general, it's just a list of something, and we must declare what it is from the get-go. Just like how when we declare a variable, we have to have an object data type, this applies to arrays as well. We have to give it some data type. So let's say, for example, we want to have an array. Well, this is how you declare an array. So you have to have the data type and then the name of the array. We can name this whatever we want. For simplicity, I'm just going to name it ARR. Then we follow this word without a space, and we add two braces. Remember, this is square braces. Please keep that in mind. It will not work if you have round braces. It's not going to work if you have curly braces. It only works with square braces. And then we're going to manually put in the values in here. So this is known as the item in the list, the items in the list, because we're going to have more than one. So let's say we have 5, 6, 0, 9, 1, -2, and 4. So it doesn't have to be in any order, but you have to separate it by a comma. In a for loop, you separate these by semicolons, not a comma. So these are just things that you have to get used to. So what's the purpose of this? Why do we need an array? Well, arrays have a lot of different functions. You can loop through an array and print out every single item. You can get the individual index value. You can get the individual value of each item. You can sort the array. You can put it in ascending order or descending order. You can add up all the values. You can do so much. The possibilities are endless. So let's first go over how we would print out every single item in the list. And so we're going to have a for loop. And the for loop is going to go through every single number. It's going to go to each index value and then print out the value itself. Note, the index value is not equivalent to the value of the item. So the index value of this is 0. So let me ask you a question. What is the length of this array? If you said 7, I'm sorry, you're incorrect. It's actually 6, because since the index value starts at 0, the next one starts at 1, the third value is 2, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6. It goes up until 6. It is arguable that there are 7 items, but the index value goes up to n minus 1, where n is the number of items in the list, excluding 0. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as n, minus 1 is 6, that's how many, that's the total index value. Anyway, we're going to declare a variable I is equal to 0. I has to be less than array.length. This just simply gets the length of the array, and that's the condition. And then I++. So, how do we print out the individual items? Well, we're going to have system.out.println, and then we're not going to just simply write I. That only gets the index value. We want to print out the value of the item itself. So what do? We do ARR, and we put in the value I. So it's going to print out array at the 0th index, which is 5, and the first index, which is 6, the second index, which is 0, and so on and so forth. Because remember, it increases 1 to I every single time, and it just keeps on doing that until the condition is met. So this is going to happen 6 times until everything gets printed out. So let's go ahead and print this and see what happens. I'm sorry, did I say 6? It prints out 7 because that's how many items there are. I don't know why my mouse does that. Let's get rid of that. So, as you can see, it prints out 5, 6, 0, 9, 1, -2, and 4. So let's say we did put in I. What's going to happen? Well, like I mentioned, it's only going to print out the values of the index. So it's going to print out 0 all the way to 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's one thing you can do with arrays. There's several more things that you can do, but those will be covered in later tutorials. So next up is user input. So when we do user input, in order to access the scanner, which is what we use to check what the user inputted, we need to write this at the very, very top of the code outside of the public class main. We're going to do import java.util.scanner, and then just end that off. What this is doing is that it's fetching the scanner, and you don't really have to worry about that. There's several things that you can import, like a hash map, a hash set, linked list, array list, so many different things. So if you want to just gain access to everything, just put star or the multiplication sign, and you have access to everything. But since we're not using everything and we're just using a scanner, we're going to put in a scanner, and that's it. And this is going to look like it's commented out. So how does a scanner work? So we have to make an object of the scanner, and this will make sense more when I cover object-oriented programming in the next tutorial. But what we do is we write scanner, and let's put in some name rather, is equal to new scanner, and then we write system.in. This will allow us to use input and get the value of a scanner. So what do we do now? So let's say we have some sort of please enter a number. Now we're going to write int val is equal to input dot next int. So what this does is it sets val is equal to whatever you input at the top, and that's going to be our scanner. So let's see what happens. So it's going to ask us, please enter a number. So let's say 78, and then it prints out 78. We could do the number you inputted was plus the value of the number. Uh, 10. The number you inputted was 10. And that's basically how you work with scanners. So you can also do stuff with characters or strings, and in order to use a string, next line. Sorry about that. So the value you inputted was Ola. And that's pretty much it. That's all there is to scanners, arrays, and for loops and while loops. There's a lot more to it, but we're going to go more in depth as we progress through the tutorials, and in upcoming tutorials we're going to go over real life applications. So we're going to tackle some possible interview questions that you might get asked. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next session.